to chick and stink to stink.
Watch your back, Dr. P! There's a monster loose and he's gonna... Whoa!
In a nasty sort of way.
Their newfound wealth.
I think it's safe to say the furries were eating good in the 90s. But the real question is, why did so many of these shows feature muscle-bound, aggressively radical, anthropomorphic men? Well, if that's a question you've ever asked yourself, not sure why you would have asked that question, we're going to talk about it in this video. Let's just get into it.
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, heroes in a half shell, turtle power.
4 turtles trained in the art of ninjutsu, mutated by a mysterious goo, and they're also teenagers. Video over. Okay, fine. It's the obvious answer, because it's the right answer. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was a cultural phenomenon. It shouldn't have worked. It was a semi-parody of Daredevil cooked up by 2 indie comic creators, Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird, probably while they were hopped up on cheap pizza and 80s action schlock, and yet, against all odds, it absolutely blew up. When TMNT made the leap to television, sure, it lost a few of its grittier, bloodier comic book elements, because, shockingly, networks weren't that keen on airing a show where 4 tubular reptiles just straight up murdered people, but the core world building remained intact. The premise was weird, but it worked. 4 ordinary pet turtles mutated into humanoid warriors after being doused in purple goop.
Every morning, without fail, I take my goop glow.
A wise old rat sensei, because of course a sewer rat would know martial arts. If you really think about it. A ninja crime syndicate, led by a guy who looks like a cheese grater, equipped with more blades than a young Londoner. And set in New York City, circa 1987, which meant crime was already so bad that mutant vigilante turtles probably flew under the radar. And it wasn't just the premise that made it work. It was the characters themselves. Each turtle had a distinct personality. Leonardo, the responsible leader, the ever-reliable ally. Michelangelo, the party dude, the comic relief of the team. Donatello does machines. He just does them. Look, these are distinct characteristics, okay? And Raphael, every friend group has one. The wanker. And if you can't figure out who the wanker in your friend group is, well, I've got some bad news. The dynamic between them felt real. They bickered, they joked, they fought together, and kids latched onto that. Because when studios and toy companies saw just how much money Turtle Mania was spinning, they had one collective thought. What if we just did that again? And thus, the mutant animal dude bro era of cartoons was born. That era, for me at least, is typified by Street Sharks, the most flagrantly derivative work of them all. Probably. It was the textbook example of someone looking at TMNT and thinking, okay, but what if they were sharks? We've swapped New York for Fission City, a setting that is very clearly just Los Angeles with extra smog and a nuclear power plant. I'm not sure where the smog is coming from if they're powered by nuclear, but hey ho. And instead of wisecracking turtles, we get trousers-wearing mutant sharks with absurdly massive upper bodies. They like to say jawsome a lot. Jawsome! And just to really hammer home that this is not a TMNT ripoff, they go out of their way to clarify that they don't even like pizza.
Pizza okay?
Pizza? Oh, come on! No way!
See? Legally distinct. Completely original. Now, if TMNT had a bizarre premise that worked, Street Sharks had a bizarre premise that didn't.
The place doesn't taste any better than it smells.
The gist of it is that a scientist, Dr. Robert Bolton, gets kidnapped and transformed into a mutant, while his 4 sons are forcibly gene-slammed, the show's words, not mine, mutating them into jacked-up shark men. So, kind of like TMNT, except instead of an old rat teaching them martial arts, they just immediately start body-slamming criminals through walls and swimming through concrete. They really like destroying property. Also, don't worry about their dad. He turns into an abomination off-screen in episode 1 and then literally never returns. The boys don't seem too bothered about it either, but the problem with the show was obvious. The premise was weaker. At least with TMNT, the ninja angle gave them a distinct identity. Street Sharks were just big, angry, and perpetually hungry for destruction. Not really much else going on. The characters were less defined. Where the Turtles had clear personalities, Street Sharks were more like slight variations on the same theme of Californian bro. And the designs were frankly absurd. Arms the size of torsos, tiny little itty-bitty baby legs, and huge gaping shark mouths. They look like the drawings I would do of wrestlers when I was 5. And that's not even the dumbest part. See, Street Sharks was born as a toy line first, putting the figurative cart before the horse. Or in this case, the plastic before the plot. Toy executives knew exactly what they were doing. They didn't start with a compelling story or memorable characters. They started with a focus group approved idea of what kids wanted to buy and then slapped together a show to justify it. This is why you get a character literally named Big Slamu. It's also why shows of this era had frequent design changes, random character introductions, and inexplicable vehicles. More toys to be sold. There was even an episode where the sharks donned scuba diving gear. They're sharks. Why do they need scuba diving gear?
I've got something here with such fantastic detail it's gonna blow you away. Hand shark! Good shush! Rocky Balboa action! Do.
Honestly, I think this might be his rawest, most passionate performance. Can you get an Oscar for an ad? He deserves one. And that's honestly the perfect way to sum up Street Sharks. A hyper-masculine, over-the-top, commercially driven slogfest. Arguably, you could create a somewhat interesting story with the premise of 4 handsome brothers who have great lives ahead of them, but then they're turned into mutant shark abominations. You know, maybe about how they come to terms with the fact they'll always be shunned by society, and how they find solace in fighting crime. But nah, the Bolton boys take one look at their new massive shark bodies and go, yeah, this rules.
To all jawsome dudes!
And to food frenzies!
Continuing down this rabbit hole, imagine this. You're a TV executive in the early 90s, desperately trying to manufacture the next big hit for the 5 to 14 male demographic. You gather your team, stare at a blank whiteboard, and start listing the scientifically proven things young boys love. Motorbikes. Yes. Action. Absolutely. Huge, muscle-bound animal men. Tried and true, baby. Mice. Biker mice men might be a bit of a hard sell. But it's too late. Production is already underway. Shit. Okay, what if they were biker mice from Mars? And thus, Biker Mice from Mars was born. Now, to their credit, the creators at least tried to mix things up compared to TMNT. Instead of sewer-dwelling ninjas, we got motorcycle-riding alien freedom fighters. And they weren't mutated, they were just born as mice men. Nothing tickles a little boy's pickle quite like 3 jacked-up brats on Harley Davidsons. That phrasing could use some work. The premise is as follows. Mars has been ravaged by the evil Plutarchians, a race of grotesque, fish-faced, alien capitalists who strip planets of their resources. Heroes Throttle, Modo, and Vinny escape to Earth and immediately decide the best way to assimilate is to form a biker gang and start punching bad guys. Their main enemy is Lawrence Limburger, an alien tycoon literally wearing a human skin suit, which is just one of many unsettling implications this show casually glosses over. It's a lot to take in. The biker mice weren't quite as blatant a TMNT ripoff as Street Sharks, but they still followed the golden rule of 90s anthropomorphic heroes. One leader, Throttle, the cool one with the sunglasses. One big guy, Modo, who has a literal robot arm because why not? And one hothead loose cannon, Vinny, whose entire personality is guy who shouts a lot. And because it was the 90s, everything had to be extreme. They didn't just ride motorbikes, they rode missile-launching, gravity-defying motorbikes.
Okay, Vincent, keep him busy. Moto and I'll take him from above.
They didn't just fight bad guys, they fought evil space capitalists trying to drain the Earth's natural resources.
The time has come, my misery-loving mutant, to implement Operation Snare.
And they had a catchphrase. Oh, you bet they had a catchphrase. Rock and ride! Which, yeah, I guess that's as good a battle cry as any, when you're 3 sentient Martian rodents fighting a space CEO.
Hey, you mice, check out these amazing feats of strength.
Now, the weird part is that Biker Mice from Mars actually has a weirdly devoted fanbase, especially in Britain and Finland, oddly enough, where it lasted way longer than it did in the US. And unlike most of its mutant animal contemporaries, Biker Mice somehow got a 2006 revival series, which is a decision that was made. At the end of the day, Biker Mice from Mars was almost self-aware enough to work, but it was still just a toy commercial in disguise. And by the time it revved onto screens, the TMNT formula was already running on fumes, hence the lackluster US performance. There's also yet another reboot planned, apparently one that involves Ryan Reynolds. I don't like Ryan Reynolds. I can't quite pinpoint why. He gives me Skinwalker vibes. Cowboys, but they're cows. Cow cops. Shut up. Enter Wild West Cowboys of Moo Mesa.
Well, as it says in the Code of the West, when the water turns to dust, ain't no use washing up for dinner.
Because, of course, when you run out of the cool animals to mutate into extreme 90s warriors, you just start doubling down on painfully obvious wordplay. A show that took one pun and built an entire universe around it. And the word cow is pulling triple duty here. Not only are they, you know, cows and cowboys, but it's also an acronym for Code of the West. So the basic premise is that a giant meteor slams into Earth, somehow forms an enormous mesa, and mutates all the animals there into humanoid hybrids. This is mentioned once in the first episode and never brought up again. And honestly, I respect that. Elmer Fudd never stopped mid-chase to question why Bugs Bunny could talk. So why should we waste time wondering why a bunch of recently sapient, beefy bovines suddenly decided to form a Wild West society? Now, to its credit, Moo Mesa actually tried to remix the tired TMNT formula by swapping out rough and tough urban street kids for cowboy lawmen.
I knew it just needed a little adjustment.
It had an aesthetic, and compared to the shit we just sifted through, it had a bit more heart. Unfortunately, having some heart doesn't guarantee commercial success. And whether it was a failure of marketing, merch, or just the fact that kids weren't clamoring for big cowman with a revolver action figures, Moo Mesa's toy presence was pretty limited. That's not to say the show didn't have its quirks. For example, this tarantula. Now, I don't want to jump to conclusions, but if this isn't a mildly racist Mexican caricature, then I don't know what is. At this point, the barrel isn't just scraped, it's been wrung dry, like the piss from my bedsheets. And yet, the glut of trash continued. We had Street Sharks, which was just TMNT, but more shark, less soul. We had Biker Mice from Mars, which was just TMNT, but on motorbikes, because vehicle toys, no other reason required. We had Cowboys of Moo Mesa, which tried to stand on its own 2 hooves, but ultimately boiled down to more well-muscled anthropomorphic cool guys. And just when you thought we couldn't possibly go any lower, someone in a boardroom stood up, straightened their tie, and declared, "Alright, hear me out. Dinosaurs. Extreme dinosaurs." And because it was the 90s, that was apparently all it took. These extreme fellas actually first appeared in the Street Sharks. Because why stop at copying the turtles once when you can do it twice? It was probably cooked up in the wake of Jurassic Park's success. This makes Extreme Dinosaurs a double derivative of a derivative, which, if my maths is correct, that means it cancels itself out and ceases to exist. I'm not very good at calculus. But honestly, there's nothing really to explain here. They're just Street Sharks again, but Dinosaurs.
What are those?
More snarling, more teeth, same soulless formula. As far as cynical, lazy spin-offs go, this is definitely one of them. And that, my friends, is where the mutant animal dude bro industrial complex finally collapsed under its own weight. Because by the time we reach Extreme Dinosaurs, it was painfully obvious that these shows weren't built to last. They weren't trying to tell stories or build worlds, they were trying to sell toys. To be fair, TMNT was also guilty of, especially as the series developed. The difference was, the Turtles merch was a byproduct of its success. With the stone well and truly bled dry, the cracks were forming. Kids had seen enough mutant monster men for a lifetime. They wanted something fresh, something original, something that didn't feel like it'd been purely created to sell trash merchandise. And just as Turtle Mania was wheezing its last breath, a new media titan rose from the east. One that would completely rewrite the Saturday morning cartoon landscape for a generation. Pokemon. With it came the rise of the anime aesthetic, and with its meteoric success, the Western style of muscle-bound action hero cartoons slowly faded away. In its place came a new wave of Japanese-inspired series that grabbed kids' attention in a way that TMNT clones never could. Shows like Yu-Gi-Oh!, Beyblade, Digimon, and Medabots. If there's one thing we've learned, it's that you can't fake authenticity. The Turtles survived because it had something real at its core. Not just a gimmick, but a genuine creative spark. The others were disposable, a fleeting wave of plastic trash that came and went, leaving very little cultural impact. Part of me does kind of miss this era of hypermasculine bros solving problems with violence. There's a certain purity to it, something that modern, overly moralizing media lacks. Sure, they shoehorned in some network-mandated, very special episode topics like drugs, pollution, the dangers of littering or whatever. But at its core, the message was simple. Dudes rock. And sometimes the best way to solve a problem isn't a heartfelt conversation or learning the power of friendship. It's with a closed fist. And that's awesome. That's actually how the world really works at its core. Whether we like it or not, violence is the supreme authority, from which all other authority is derived. There's literally an episode of The Street Sharks where they depose a foreign dictator with violence. That actually happens in real life. Simpler times. Back when kids' cartoons weren't afraid to teach important life lessons, like how to suplex a dictator. If you enjoyed this descent into 90s nostalgia garbage, hit like, subscribe, and drop a comment. Tell me which cursed Turtles knockoff you remember the most. Believe it or not, there are even more of these horrific shows out there, and they're all pretty much terrible. And if you were a die-hard Extreme Dinosaurs fan, first of all, times must have been hard in your house, and second, explain yourself in the comments, and that is shameless engagement bait. Hit up the Discord if you want to tell me what I got wrong or see what I'm up to. Hint hint, it's making videos probably. And give me money on Patreon, if you like. Now, if you'll excuse me, I think I need to jet wash my brain after binging Street Sharks episodes for this video. TTFN.